So each of the TEKs, they start off with like an overarching introduction, and that stays constant from the beginning of the content area, like, EC through 12, right? There's an overarching goal or idea. Why do we teach this course, this content area in Texas schools? And so it's important for you to have read and really understand what all of your designing of instruction and activities, assessments, what that is, supposed to be working towards. And so we'll take a look at that. And then as a an activity, to immerse yourself into the nitty-gritty of the content area, I would like for you to go by grade level. So since yours is 7 through 12, begin at 7th grade and go through and see, because usually each of the content area have particular strands that they want for you to like really go into detail with. And so looking at those different areas that they would like for you to focus on, and you can usually tell what they are because A, they list them for you, but B, you'll see them underneath, like, here's one, the history's portion of it, and then we'll just read from the beginning. So in 7th grade, students study the history of Texas from early times to present. Content is presented with more depth and breadth than in grade 4. Students examine the full scope of Texas history, including natural Texas and its people, age of contact, Spanish colonial, Mexican national, Revolution and Republic, early statehood, Texas in the Civil War and Reconstruction, cotton, cattle, railroads, age of oil, Texas in the Great Depression and World War II, civil rights and conservatism, and contemporary Texas eras. The focus in each area is on key individuals, events, and issues and their impacts. Students identify regions of Texas and the distribution of the population within and among the reasons, and explain the factors that cause Texas to change from an agrarian to an urban society. Students describe the structure and function of municipal, county, and state governments, explain the influence of the U.S. Constitution on the Texas Constitution, and examine the rights and responsibilities of Texas citizens. Students use primary and secondary sources to examine the rich and diverse cultural background of Texas as they identify the different racial and ethnic groups that settled in Texas to build a republic and then a state. Students analyze the impact of scientific discoveries and diverse cultural backgrounds of Texas as they identify. I'm sorry, I have to let the dog out because I can't like read and have him barking. It drives me crazy.
Okay.
My brain can rest. Jeez. Sorry, I'm ADD and my brain was like, over there, dog, as I tried to read. So they analyze the impact of scientific discoveries and diverse and technological innovations on the development of Texas in various industries such as agriculture, energy, medical, computer, and aerospace. Students use primary and secondary sources to acquire information about Texas. To support the teaching of essential knowledge and skills, the use of a variety of rich primary and secondary source material such as biographies, autobiographies, novels, speeches, letters, diaries, poetry, songs, and images is encouraged. It's needed. Motivating resources are available from museums, historical sites, presidential libraries, and local and state preservation societies. There is a wealth of resources to be able to do like a virtual, like field trips to different historical sites. And so there's just like so much that you could integrate in order to, get the kids to be excited about social studies. So here are the strands. There are 8 strands which compose social studies, essential knowledge and skills for social studies, and are intended to be, and this is what sort of like remains constant through each grade level. Like 7th grade focuses on Texas history. There are other histories, but they all build on these like central 8 strands. Are intended to be integrated for instructional purposes. Skills listed in the social studies skills strands in the subsection of this section should be incorporated into the teaching of all essential knowledge and skills for social studies. A greater depth of understanding of complex content material can be attained when integrated social studies content from the various disciplines and critical thinking skills are taught together. Statements that contain the word including reference content, this is important, that must be mastered, while those containing the phrase such as are intended as possible illustrative examples and ways to prepare them for stuff that's leading. Because we do that with the TEKS, you know, it may not be that they have to have it mastered by 2nd grade, but it's you introduce it and then it has to be mastered by like 3rd or 4th grade. So understanding that if it has including, it has that particular skill or concept has to be mastered.
I didn't get that.
Sorry. My watch talks to me sometimes. Students identify the role of U.S. free enterprise system within the parameters of this course and understand that the system may also be referenced as capitalism or the free market system. Throughout social studies in kindergarten through 12th grade, students build a foundation in history, geography, economics, government, citizenship, culture, science, technology, and society, and social studies skills. The content as appropriate for the grade level or course enables students to understand the importance of patriotism, the function in a free enterprise society, and appreciate the basic democratic values of our state and nation as referenced in the Texas Education Code. Students understand that a constitutional republic is a representative form of government whose representatives derive their authority from the consent of the governed, served for an established tenure, and are sworn to uphold the Constitution. State and federal laws mandate a variety of celebrations and observances, including celebrating Freedom Week. Each social studies class shall include during Freedom Week as provided under Texas Education Code, or during another full school week as determined by the school board, or appropriate instruction concerning the intent, meaning, and importance of the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. OMG. Okay. Bill of Rights, Constitution, all that good stuff has to be done. The entire district has to participate. Moreover, the teachers are the ones who like sort of organize the activities, instructional messages, all that stuff for that week. Each school district shall require that during Celebrate Freedom Week or other week, students grades 3 through 12 study and recite the following text from the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal and that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their powers and consent of the governed. So that's what everybody has to know it. Grades 3 through 12. So then we get into students also have to discuss how and whether the actions of U.S. citizens, local, state, and federal governments are have achieved the ideals espoused in the founding documents. Like, have we achieved life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? I mean, I think many people would argue that we haven't, that we're kind of getting further and further away. But those are ideas that you would be okay to talk about. So knowledge and skills, you have the history section. It gives particular things that you have to know about. You got to know these people. If they have them here, Alonso Alvarez de what is it? Benida? Is it?
Yeah,
Benida?
like that.
Benida? Yeah, so if you can't like say who he is or what he's about, you just have to Google it. And there's some really great resources to study up on Texas history. Like you can just look up Texas history, 7th grade, like tutorial, and there's people and they talk about all of the different historical accounts in such a way that is less, more engaging than just reading about it, than just looking up these people and reading what they did. But it is important, if it is listed in the TEKS, that you be able to know what this person is, like what occasion this is, what is the age of oil, what was Texas like during the Great Depression. If you can't articulate what that is and what some of the things that happened during the Great Depression, then you have to Google them. You just have to look those up. And there is I'm not sure if you have it. Do you have the Memetrics document?
Oh yes, Ms. Garza sent me the book, so I have that too.
Excellent. So that will have a little bit of those names, bios, but if you just Google any of these or YouTube any of these, you'll find them. Now, this was 7th grade, and we'll go all the way down. So here's down, and there's more continued. So you see that one of the subsections is geography, one of the 8 sort of strands of what the whole purpose of social studies is about, to get us to be good citizens, to get us to understand economics. And so here's economics, here's government, here's citizenship, and all of that. Here's culture, here are the different areas and what we need to be able to do. So underneath this social studies skills section, which is the last strand of the 8, the student applies critical thinking skills to organize and use information acquired through established research methodologies from a variety of valid sources, including technology. So established research methodologies, the methods by which we teach our students, we model for our students to research. And so many times a district will have an intranet. It's not like internet, but it's a database, and it is their subscriptions to several different, learning instructional apps, practice apps, creation tools, and huge libraries, digital libraries of articles and novels, and just like a wealth of stuff for them to to use to research with. So these are some of the particulars in 7th grade that they must be able to do. They are expected to do these things before they leave our classroom. Differentiate between, locate and use valid primary and secondary sources such as media and news services, biographies, interviews, artifacts to acquire information about Texas. Analyze information by applying absolute and relative chronology through sequencing, categorizing, identifying cause and effect relationships, comparing and contrasting, finding the main idea, summarizing, making generalizations, predictions, drawing inferences, and concluding. These are all skills that you must model for them within the social studies content, and then show them, how do I find, like, this is a graphic organizer for cause and effect. Let's go through this article and see what was the effect that the Great Depression had on Texas. What was the effect, and what were some of the things that came out of that situation? Going through the different historical eras, historical facts, and really sequencing them, analyzing them, looking at the relationship between different events, and how how one thing can lead to another, practicing their generalization skills, and those are skills that they also are learning and needing in their English language arts and reading class. So you will only be reinforcing skills that have already been taught since they were a lot younger in their English language arts and reading class. So, but it's very important that you, because we show it sort of sometimes in isolation, but to show them this is the cause and effect. Let's write all these things that happened, and then everything that happened as a result of it. And this is like the sort of like representation of that historical time period. It's a representative of these cause and effects and what came of that. So going through that, getting them to be efficient with those different skills, applying information, utilizing those skills. Organize and interpret information using outlines, reports, databases. Anytime you use, like if I'm a social studies teacher in the 7th grade and we're going to look at an outline, if I haven't looked at an outline before, I'm going to explain what outlines are, what they do. Let's take a look at it. Let me model you my outline. Or if it's a report that they're seeing for the first time, again, every new thing needs to be modeled, especially if they're like graphs, databases, visuals, charts, timelines. There are so many different types of charts. Now, we know there are ways in which to read charts. There are ways in which to read graphs. Not all graphs and charts are the same. We have to know the basics of it. And then every time we encounter one, let's do it again. Let's identify, what are we measuring on this, y-axis? What's that measuring? So that we continuously use academic vocabulary like y-axis, so that carries on when they're looking at graphs to their math class, and they understand how relationships work. Everything will connect better if they become more proficient with the language. And so anytime you they have to organize and interpret it, which means every time you are discussing a report or discussing a visual or discussing a graph or chart or timeline or map, that you do all the, let's take a look at the key or the legend for this map, and what sort of things are on here. Like, what is this even a map of? Is this a city, or is this like a location, the war? I mean, different, there's different types of map. It's like leaving my head right now. I think it's like topography, where it shows you like the actual levels, like height and stuff. Like,
Oh yeah, like how the ground looks. I think like the hills.
yeah. So there's all different types of things and maps, graphs, especially with technology. And so just getting them to have a lot of practice will allow them to be able to analyze and apply that information by themselves, which is what they have to do before they leave your class. So identify bias and point of view from a historical context surrounding an event that influence the participants. And there's no shortage of examples for that, but just so that they can sort of acknowledge that bias sort of exists at every level, and that it's important that we, like, even at the teaching level, I know that I was one of those really annoying, like, students who like sat in the front and wanted to answer the questions. I was like I really thought I took it as like my learning experience. It's like my thing. And then I was in it to win it. And not everybody was appreciative of that. And I felt that, hello, Stephanie, like anybody else but Stephanie, like to answer the question when they need, they're asking for a response. There's bias in every profession, in every system. And the reason it's important to acknowledge that is so that we can be cognizant of our own bias, right? That we don't perpetuate bias, or to like really reflect inward, or to see how a bias is incredibly limiting and acts as sort of like a necrosis or like a cancer to whatever is going on. The bias cannot be sustained for so long, it will crumble. So, but just looking at how that impacts at it, which is why, social studies is a really great, I mean, they're all incredible. Teaching is just fun to begin with, but there's so much you can do apart from just acknowledging that things happened, but actually taking it as a time to like discuss like, what was the teachable moment here? History is meant to be, sort of a guidebook on what happened in the past, so we don't repeat failures in the future. I don't know that we're doing a super good job of that right now, and I think we need to do a little bit better. So I feel like it's a really exciting time to be a social studies teacher or a teacher in general. Okay, so student communicates in written or oral, visual, very important. Create written, oral, visual presentations. You yourself, your lessons must be written, oral, visual, video. You know, when you are introducing a new concept, like let's say the word bias in a 7th grade class, you would have to define the word bias. Not all of your native English speakers are going to know right away what bias means. They won't. And although it's not an inherently super content word, because you have students that will not understand it, any word that you will cover that is going to be necessary for comprehension, best practice is to do a direct instruction of that vocabulary word. And while you're doing it, that you provide the definition, the dictionary definition or denotation. And then, you know, let's talk about how we can say it in layman's terms, just like in basic language. Let's say it how basically we would and have them rewrite it. A visual or video or visual representation, whether, you know, my students loved it because we would do it with all the vocabulary and every day we had new vocabulary, but I always used the Frere model. And there was the denotation, our, you know, connotation, I guess, or our definition of it. A visual, synonyms, antonyms, maybe a sentence later, or but the students always laugh because I'm a terrible artist. And so I started teaching in a time where it was overhead projector, where you like sat next to, and it was hot, and I'm a hot girl. Like I'm like, you need a fan right next to me if I'm working at the thing, even though I had a little fan in there, it got very warm. But so, you know, drawing it on there with my little vis-a-vis, and it looked like everything looked like a rock or a stick figure. And then came the advent of you know, more progressive clip art and websites, and because I started in 2003, 2004, and then it was like we were off, and I could find all sorts of visual, and that visual connection to what a word means is so incredibly important. A visual connection to like an important event is you know, helps create a more defined neurological pathway. We're not just giving it to you in one learning preference or learning style. Like I'm just going to say it to you. I'm going to show you and illustrate for you. And then we're going to write about it. And so giving them practice doing all of those things. You will be doing those things with them. And they will also have to produce the same for you. Okay, so we're going to take a look at another one really quickly. So 8th grade. So here are your different high school TEKS.
Okay.
And this is all of the content, and this is going to be, that's not it. Oh no, hold on, wait. I went like all the way back. One moment, I'll get us back to where we need to be. Okay, so you are going to use I'm not gonna do and I'll put the things in here for you and just share with you the folder of the TEKS. Okay, remember that at both middle school, 7th and 8th, sorry, 8th high school courses. Now, does that mean that you have to memorize, you know, the TEKS? Absolutely not. Nobody has them memorized. But do you need to have like a working knowledge of things that the students are going to be tested on? Absolutely. The Pearson exam is composed of these TEKS and your state standards. And I'm going to pull up the standards for you now. So your state standards. And I'll just throw them in there real quickly and also put, I think I have a couple of manuals too. But honestly, these two documents, and one of them is a link to like several documents, but these two things are the only things that get sent from the state, from TEA to Pearson when they create an exam. And if the standards or the TEKS change, like they go to the legislature and they say, we think they need to be learning this as well, our teachers need to be doing this as well, which they often add things, like not often, this one, yours hasn't been revised since 2012. But when they do, they change, they send the new document and the exam changes. So these two documents are where they get the content and the skills that you need to be able to do for the exam. And so here are your standards, and every content area has these standards. So if anybody wanted to take any content exam, they could prepare for it by downloading the standards that correlate with their content area and by studying the TEKS, understanding what I need to know for this content and how I need to be able to apply it in the classroom. And that's what the exam is on. So here are the standards, and the standards get rearranged, sort of like rearranged, and they become the competencies, right? They're the different competencies within the domains. And actually on the website for Pearson, there's like a little graph, and it shows you the domain and the competencies and like actually what standards they align to, like where the standards come from, like where did those competencies come from. So the way that you read this document, we'll look at one that's a little bit more so here, this one's like not that big. Social studies teacher effectively integrates the various social science disciplines. So this is what you have to know on the left-hand side. You have to know before you get into the classroom how social science disciplines relate to each other. Like, how does economics relate to government? So like, and how it matters, like they're not in isolation in a vacuum. It's sort of this like organism, right? And we need all of these different areas to be healthy, like the citizens and like society and all that good stuff. So how do they relate to each other? How social science disciplines relate to other content areas? So for instance, like social studies, how does that relate to English language arts and reading? Like, how do they overlap? In fact, as an ELAR teacher myself, I often sought out history teachers on my campuses and asked like, hey, what are your kids doing? And if they told me they were doing like the Roaring 20s, or we're doing, you know, the Gonzalez battle or the Battle of the Alamo, then I would personally seek out readings for my student, poetry, even if it was for a little activity one-off and we were doing something else, so that they could make a connection and be like, oh, this was written, I'm learning about this in Mr. Henchman's class, like and so they wrote poetry to talk about things that were happening in their life. So they make connections, and we're supposed to help them make those connections. And we can't make those connections if we don't see them ourselves. The vertical alignment of social studies. So again, the vertical alignment, not the horizontal alignment. And that means K, social studies ideas, how they start going at first grade, second, we start thinking about community, sense of community and citizenship and those ideas. And then it becomes, you know, a little bit more focused, and that you have second, third, fourth, fifth, and all of that is vertical alignment. And so how do we build via the TEKS? Remember, we're looking at the TEKS document. We only looked at 7th grade, but looking at the TEKS and how do they, each of these levels build or scaffold so that the students can get to a point in high school where they can choose, you know, several different types of, you know, study within the content area. Again, vertical alignment of social sciences in the TEXES essential knowledge and skills from grade level to grade level, including prerequisite knowledge and skills. So that alignment, and like I said, they'll be looking at charts and graphs since we introduced them in elementary. Does that mean anytime you're looking at a graph that you should just assume they know how to read it and move on and say, oh, well, this is this and that, you see that? No, let's take a look at what is presented here on this graph. What are we looking at this graph? Like, what's being measured? What's being represented here every time they see one? So if they're able to do it on their own, we're modeling all those opportunities that instructional opportunities, that way they're able to do it in independent practice and on their own independently in life. Now, every correct answer on your exam is going to come from the right-hand column. I'll say that again. So every correct answer is going to come from the right-hand column. It is going to be the teacher doing one of these things, right? Now, for the social studies test, it could be a little bit from the no column, because they might just ask you a factual, right, knowledge question concerning social studies. What do you find? Do you find more application questions, or do you find more factual based content specific questions in your experience? Ms. Rodriguez? Are you there? I think I lost you. Okay. So you will see standard 3, using your knowledge of, again, on this left-hand side, you see 3.3K is the TEKS. The TEKS specific to history, geography, economics, government, citizenship, culture, science, technology, and society. Remember, those are the strands that they said all the grade levels need to be building in their knowledge in all of those areas. So this is about you planning, creating a design, a plan for instruction, your effective implementation of the curriculum, activities, instruction, assessment, and evaluation of your students' progress. Again, most of the time it is going to be the teacher doing something on the right-hand side. So it'll be the teacher using a variety of instructional strategies to ensure all students' reading comprehension of content-related texts, including helping students link the content of text to their life and connect ideas across different texts. So that's one reading comprehension skill that we can use. So we have them chunk the text, which means every paragraph, we have them sort of summarize what they read or identify like the main idea of that paragraph. So they have to engage in metacognition. And metacognition is them thinking about their thinking. Meta means me, and cognition is thinking. So you like reflecting on your comprehension. Did I understand that? And they have to do it if they're tasked with, you know, jotting down the main idea of each paragraph before they move on, or making a connection, a comment in what a way that it connects to their real lives or something that they've, you know, experienced. So helping them make those links helps them with understanding, comprehending the text that you're reading. And so for the purposes of the exam, they would give you a scenario that says, Ms. Salceda wants to get her students, you know, to increase their reading comprehension of like Texas, you know, historical battles or something like that. Which of the following strategies would be most appropriate to help her students, you know, understand the articles, right? And then it'll give you the right answer is going to be the one where you're having the student engage in metacognition. You're having the students think about, what did I read and can I connect it to myself? What did I read and can I connect it to something different that I know from somewhere else? Anything else, to my life, to the outside world, to Ms. Salceda's English class, you know, making those connections will help with their understanding and their ability to sort of retain and access that information later, which is what we want them to do. We don't want for them to just sort of memorize something and then whoop, they forgot it a couple of days later. We want it to be something that resonates and that creates that neurological pathway that, you know, that can be retrieved later, used as information later. History, individuals, events, and issues that shaped the history of Texas. So there probably won't give you such easy like naming people, but they'll maybe ask you to analyze information or to like what led to this, you know, what, and you're supposed to know what led to it by knowing the events, the issues that helped shape Texas history, and then the other areas that they denote here, like, you know, Native American groups, European exploration, manifest destiny, all that good history stuff. Everything that was specified for the social studies portion of grades 4 through 8, you are also responsible for. And so if you're unfamiliar with that, then certainly just go to the same place I got the wait. Here, and you have social studies 4 through 8. And it is very similar. It's just a little less rigorous. It's a little less intense, right? We get more intense as we build. And so obviously, 4th graders are not ready cognitively, emotionally, maturity wise to even get into the ins and out of everything that is social studies. So there is, like I said, a vertical alignment where we build. So you know, having a look at these standards will not hurt you in any way, but for sure you need to focus on the ones that are for yours. So we'll continue. 4 through 8, history. EC through 8. So the concepts of EC through 4 are listed here for you. So you can just look through them. You don't even have to go to that other document. You know that you're 7 through 12, but you just have to know these things. So they're listed here for you. It's always the case that like a math teacher that's going to teach math 7 through 12 or math 4 through 8 has to know everything that preceded their content area. So you're doing social studies 7 through 12. You are responsible for knowing the stuff that 4 through 8 and EC through 8 before, you know, to be honest, EC through 12. But it's just the historical beginnings. And like I said, it just gets more complex as we get into the older grade levels. More geography, growth, distribution, movement. That's something very important in the social studies classes, especially with like concerning the geography class, human geography as well. Let's take a look at some of those other TEKs, some of the high school TEKs for you. So we have human, and you have, oh, that goes with the AP. I guess it goes with AP. So let's take a look at the regular one. So we're going to look at economics. What are these? Are all which one of these? Oh no, this can't be it. Where are the other geography courses? Oh, I went to the other ones. Okay, I went to the wrong one. Never mind. I was like, why are none of the normal high school classes coming out? Like, I'm like, what? They changed everything. Here they are. I'm so sorry. So you have economics, US history, world geography, United States government, psychology, sociology, special topics, special studies research method, personal finance literacy, Mexican American studies, African American studies, social studies advanced studies, economics advanced studies, and personal financial literacy and economics. So these are all ideas that might show up on your exam. You are responsible because you are eligible to teach any of these listed here. Does that make sense? Hello?